Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of an experiment called Life with Alex Mackenzie. That's me. As always, this episode is brought to you by Punchline Nutrition. Go check out our product NeuroBoost. It's nootropic. I take it before I do any podcast, before any comedy writing, before I go on stage and perform. It helps me be a little bit smarter. I don't think, what do we say? We don't guarantee it'll make you smarter, but we guarantee it will make you less dumb. So go to Punchline Nutrition, go check it out, NeuroBoost. You're going to love it. Use coupon code ATJ. You'll save 25% at checkout. Also, my Never Been Better tour is now on sale. I'm touring around BC right now, is on sale. So go to alexhilljokes.com/live shows and grab yourself some tickets. Come on out. It's by far the best hour of stand-up comedy I've ever put together. So I'd be very happy for you guys to come and take a look at it. Again, use the coupon code ATJ. Save yourself 25% at checkout. Now, today, I am very excited. Dude. I'm very excited for this podcast. I've been looking forward to it as soon as you booked it in, and we had him coming onto the show because it's a topic I'm very interested in and I don't know enough about. So I'm excited to learn. This guy we have, so he has got a degree in biology, I believe it was in stem cell. He was also a national level athlete, and he is a business owner. Please welcome Daniel Tausan. Daniel, how you doing?
Alex, I'm great. I'm interested what's in that Neuro Boost. I'm guessing it's phosphatidylcholine, some B vitamins, some omegas, some stuff to keep the brain flowing and firing fast.
Yeah, you pretty much you got the whole recipe. It's a proprietary blend, so could you keep it down, please? Actually, no, yeah, we got some GABA in there,
Yeah, yeah,
and
neurotransmitter,
yeah, and boron, yeah,
little minerals,
glutamine, yeah,
glutamine, essential amino acid, or non-essential, but essential for life.
yeah, yeah. Awesome, man. So, dude, I'm very excited to talk to you. This is longevity is like a thing. I'm really, really interested in this, and I don't know enough about it. So I'm very uneducated. I'll let you know. I went to trade school, went to BCIT. I saw you went to UBC.
Yeah, I would say you're probably more educated than you know. So let's tap into what is it what is it you probably know better than most highly educated individuals? Let's start with a very basic one. I'll ask you. I love asking the question here to see people's thoughts.
Yeah,
When you hear the word science,
right,
now this word is masturbated today like no other, right? I
right,
mean, science has done all these atrocities in the name of science. Trust the science. I am the science. Science hasn't yet realized.
right.
It's starting to lose meaning when you look at it that way. So, when you hear science, what does it mean to you?
Ooh, to me, science, I think it's like I just think it's the scientific method of figuring stuff out, right? Like, and I think a big thing with science seems to be it's like, oh, I learned this with entrepreneurship as well, but like, be wrong as fast as possible,
That's
right?
that's
So like
that's brilliant.
science, it's just like, hey, like, because I do notice, like, I give scientists a hard time myself sometimes, It's like I used to when I first started doing comedy, one of the first bits I wrote was about scientists and just like how do they know how far away Jupiter is when I'm like, you can't even tell me, or like what the density of Jupiter is. And I'm like, yeah, you can't tell me what's under my own 2 feet without drilling a hole, taking a core sample and sending it to a lab. So I remember, but that's just being arrogant. But yeah, I think science you get gets a bad rap because they're wrong a lot. But I think the idea is that's how you get ahead, right? You're like, okay, we learned this and what we used to believe, now we can disprove, and then you keep chipping away until you get further ahead.
Yeah, I mean, brilliant. I would say it's not the science that got it wrong, it's the person that got something wrong,
Right,
right? Where you said it, as fast as possible, know stuff. And that's exactly it. Your interpretation of it is a story, but the science is what you measured.
right,
Hey, I measured some gas in Jupiter. Hey, I measured some core samples underneath your feet. Now you can give me a story and you could be wrong. That's fine. And that's a
right,
part I think people aren't separating from what really the science is. And so if you don't know what the science is, you don't know how to ask the questions. You
right,
don't ask, right? You listed things that are in the supplement. That's science. We know exactly what's in there. We did our machines and we got there. But how those all interact in the body, well, that's still some room for discovery because even though someone may be very confident,
right.
and that's the part that people I think get caught up in. Someone can be very confident what they're saying. They might be confident with like one grain of sand on the beach.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just a very shaky foundation.
And they're selling you like they're talking about the whole beach, right? And
Right.
that's something I think people have to realize is that I've spent, about almost 10 plus years, a decade in analyzing blood. And I've gotten to see, call it the experimental side of things, where we got 500, 600 variables for one or two individuals. Now, each individual now is giving you this like constellation of different things going on. And you sort of have to take a step back, be like, well, what we thought really these, biomarkers or these metrics meant in the blood, we're sort of guessing because we only measure like five or six at a time, under
Right.
normal circumstances. But when you get five, 600, like, oh, this is giving you a very different understanding of what's going
Right. So then
on.
you can see. So what is just a very ignorant, what is a biomarker? Like how do you
Well,
define that?
absolutely. That's a great one. So, you take a blood test
Yep.
and it lags. You took it yesterday. And then you get your information, a day or two or three afterwards. So
Right.
then you can use that measurement, that biological measurement, to estimate whether things are going well or not. And that's what you call a biomarker, something that
So
gives you an idea that's measurable and that gives you sort of the prognostic, the diagnostic, the prediction value from it.
right. So would a biomarker be something like the level of vitamin D in my system?
Absolutely,
Or
yeah.
is it more based on genetics, where they're like, okay,
Yeah.
genetically you have this?
So two parts there. They're not mutually exclusive. They're
Okay.
synergistic. So genetics is going to be. I think people are lagging behind with understanding genetics. Genetics is not your call it your end all be all to your health.
Right.
Because if you had health at any point in time in your life, that means you messed it up. It wasn't like, oh, it's like a guitar. That's how I think of genetics. Think of it like a musical
Okay.
instrument. It's a
Right.
storage system, and you have to respect and use that storage system. So if you don't know how to live life with, call it the rules of life, the
Right.
real rules of life, the movement, the nutrition, the exposures, then you're gonna get problems, right? So very few of us have genetic problems. So
Right.
if you did, you knew from a very early age. So
Right.
about 95 to 98% full superpowers that comes with the genome. So
Okay.
it is complicated in a sense where, your cholesterol, your vitamin D levels, your, insulin signaling, your will be slightly different in terms of where the range is. And this
Hmm.
is what makes it very hard from my end to make biological age calculations, risk calculations, predictions, is because there is a very large variation from person to person.
Right. I did hear about like because I read a good book on it's called The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung.
Yep.
So, and he talks a lot about insulin resistance is kind of, and he
Yep.
goes on and it basically how insulin resistance is a very, it helps determine your body set weight and like what your physique size is going to be.
Yep.
And so he talks about
Which is
how like,
adjustable.
yeah, through, and he talks about through fasting. Like
Yep.
fasting is a good way of doing it because it's like to develop a resistance, you have like, a high level over a long period of time. So just inversely have a low level for a long period and you'll become more sensitive to it. But yeah, I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So you're on what I would say is a non-negotiable. That's a rule of life. And we
Right.
we say intermittent fasting or fasting, but it's just default, right? Like
Right.
we've known this from physiology textbooks for over 100 years, if not longer. Heck, diabetes isn't a new disease. It was present in ancient India and in ancient Egypt, right? The
Right.
honey urine, that's how they knew it at that point in time. And so the notion of you must respect how you ingest food is something that's come very apparent to our generation because we have a refrigerator. We have food at
Right.
every corner. We have 24-hour access to food. Now you have to develop a sense of will, sense of urgency to be disciplined, dare I say it, have a respect towards your food because constant eating shifts your system and your signaling to saying, hey, we got to digest. No
Right.
cleaning the blood, no recuperating. I can't do hormonal signaling to anything else. I must deal with the food. So it's not your genetics that caused your problem. It's your late night, I'm eating at 10 o'clock every single night for 5, 10, 7, whatever years. That's
Right.
going to cause problems, to anybody. Even if you're an Olympic athlete, yeah, you can burn through the calories to a certain extent. But what happens to athletes? Here's a good example where I say, let's take a look at science.
Yeah.
Science is very simple. You exist, therefore you're going to give information to the rest of us.
Okay.
Athletes exist. What do? They do a very good job of remodeling their cells, right? We're cellular beings. We started with one
Right.
cell. Now we're about 30 to 70 trillion, based on how big you are. So it's a lot of
Yeah.
cells.
Yeah.
And each cell, has a timer. It can only last for so long. Now, athletes do a great job of extending that timer. They're like now they have a little bit more, call it lifespan that they've added
And
to the
and
years.
is that based on telomere length? Is that correct or
No,
no?
not at all.
It's
No,
completely
that's
different. Okay, perfect.
no, no, no. Tell me your length. We can jump into that, but
No, yeah. Keep
it,
going.
it has to do a lot with just you can think about it like a clean factory. Your cell is like a little factory. The DNA is the renewal aspect of it. So if you damage DNA at any point, then you're going to die a lot faster. So what damages DNA? Well, a lot of things that are present in foods or processed foods or detergents or things that soak in, they can end
Right.
up doing DNA damage. Can we repair that? Yeah, we can to a certain extent. What's the most damaging, the harshest way to damage the DNA? Just radiation. So you
Right.
can
So is
you can
that
take
like I've heard epigenetic noise?
for sure. Yeah, that now you're throwing in a lot of like the big words in there. So, that would be like you trying to understand, take a look at the genome and trying to make inferences. So you'd
Right.
have to, scan it, look at it, and what does it mean? So that would be the
Right.
noise in any kind of call it sense. And then the epigenetics is what are you looking at when you look at the epigenetics? We have DNA, which is the sequence, but then you
Yeah.
can look at the way in which this they call it the structure around the DNA, looks like. Whether it's I'm gonna throw in some buzzwords here, but you can think of it just like scaffolding. Is it
Right.
histones? Is it methylation? Is it acetylation? Is it sumylation? Is it nitrosylation? You can now start looking at different points of these, call it joists and boards and different parts, to be like, oh, okay, these are going off. The corners
Right.
aren't are good. The spacing, the framing isn't working. The framing's drifting. And so you
Right.
can say, the framing's drifting. That's going to be not so good in terms of health span. We know as it drifts that you'll die, sooner, or the cell will die, collapse sooner. But you have to think of it as, like I said, we have trillions of cells. So if you look
Yeah,
at
I
telomere
heard that your
lengths of
DNA.
immune cells, then that's not your liver cell, your heart cell, your pancreatic cell. And this is where the part gets complicated because we don't age at the same rate on the cell level. Some cells will age faster depending on
Right.
what we're doing, what we're exposing ourselves to. So let me break it down into the cells and what's the other part that takes the athlete's life sooner. Because athletes don't live as long as you think they do. They end
Oh,
up,
is it just a strain on your heart or what?
yeah, so it's often a stroke or a cardiovascular event that'll take, an athlete sooner than you would expect. And so
Right.
it's this idea of not maintaining the physiology or the function that the cells are working together to exude, like breathing, like pumping your blood, like circulating, all those kind of bigger, higher order functions, they
Mhm.
get compromised or we don't maintain them like we're supposed to. It's like a Ferrari engine at one point in time, and it's still got the Ferrari engine, but the chassis is sitting in a Honda Civic. So you try and fire up the engine, and boom, you pop a blood vessel, right? Or you explode.
Right. So is it that your heart is too strong for the arteries and stuff? So it
Yeah.
like your blood pressure gets too high and pops?
Yeah, so
That's
that's
crazy.
one
So your heart muscle's like just too jacked. It's like, dude, I have such a strong little machine here, and your
that's
veins
actually
are
what
like
happens.
weak and
Yeah.
worn out. Dude, that's a really good analogy. I like the Ferrari engine and the Honda chassis where it's like, yeah, yeah, you're going too fast and then it's like your suspension falls off or something.
It's pretty much it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the heart is actually that's one of the metrics that we can use to that's one of my favorite metrics is you can tell me, hey, I was never an athlete, never got that fit. But if I
Right.
just take your resting heart rate, so
Hmm.
that means every single pump, how much does it take for you to be able to circulate your blood versus the best comparison is you when you were call it at your optimum. And so what
Right.
happens is your heart doesn't actually lose fitness as the rest of us does. So if your heart stroke volume is called the amount of
Right.
blood it can pump per pump, then it stays adapted for a majority of your life. So if your heart rate's
Right.
underneath 60, even if you did call it, hey, I never went to high level, athletics, but you're just active as a kid. You
Right.
played whatever, hockey, you played soccer, you did swimming, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And now later in life, you take your resting heart rate, right? You wake up, you're relaxed. There's not too much going on. Take it over a few days so that you have call it some consistency where maybe you're stressed out or you're gonna set up shop and camp somewhere else or you're super excited that you're gonna do a live show somewhere.
Right.
So having that understanding, hey, my resting heart rate's 58, that tells me that your heart is adapted. And that's a great
Right.
thing. That means, hey, you can get a lot of mileage in life, but
Right.
there is ways in which you must do things in different decades of your life in order to make sure that you get there. Because I would like for you or for everyone that, especially that I come in contact with, to avoid the abrupt ends, right? Like
Right.
when you're ready to finish your experiment called life here, you're
Yeah.
just like, hey, I'm done, right? And so
Yeah.
I had that in my family. So my great aunt lived to 104,
Holy cow.
and she called everyone into the room one day, and she said what she had to say to everybody in the family,
Right.
and she said, light me a candle. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow. And they didn't take her seriously. Like, oh, okay, that's kind of a weird thing to say. It was kind of took everyone by surprise, and she didn't wake up. And when the
Wow.
doctor came, she said, "Well, there's no blood clot. There's no issue with any of her organs. Like there was she just left. Like there
Right.
isn't the same, call it jarring experience that's a lot of people have. And I
Right.
think this is how we're supposed to go. So as that's been my story in my family, I've seen that others have had that too. Where
Right.
maybe not till 104, but dad leaves at 84 where he's happy. His kids are
Yeah.
set. His wife has passed and he's done. He's like, all right, you guys are good. I'm out of here. So what is that? What is really that ability to do that? I'm fascinated with,
Right.
and I would love for people to have call it a skillful way of living, right? And
Right.
there is a skillful way of living. It's like, humor is a good sign of intelligence, and your ability to learn is the, I'd say, most important thing for your intelligence,
Well,
right?
that's what I've found with learning. So, you know what? A thing I always say is it's a lot harder to make the wrong decision when you have the right information. So, you know what I mean? Like you're like,
Oh yeah,
oh, so that's what happened where I always struggle with weight. Like I was always overweight. I wasn't like obese or really heavy, but I was just a heavier guy. And I have lost 60 pounds like three times in my life, only to always
nice.
gain it back. And then that's where I read, that's why I got the obesity code. Cause I was like, dude,
Yeah.
like I'm so frustrated in this. I just keep ending up back here. And then I always think, knowledge is power. And that is what, if I can get this information, it will help me move forward. So I learned there from that Jason Fung book all about insulin sensitivity. That's where I started doing some fasting. I was like, okay, I'll fast. I'll start cutting out sugar, watching, making sure I'm eating more whole foods. Um, and then the one that I really got into was David Sinclair, and he has was it Lifespan?
Hmm.
So that's where I got the thing like epigenetic noise, all of this stuff. He did a really good job of explaining like how your cells are either replicating or repairing. You're doing like one or the other, right? And then it's like your sirtuins are the little workers, and the NAD is like the boss telling it what to do. So that I've actually been taking um NR, so it's like a NAD precursor, I believe, right? So I've been
I
taking
mean, yeah, I can tell you. I guess, yeah. Keep going. Hit me.
Well, no, I've been taking NR for like 4 years now, pretty
Okay.
consistently. And I do a crazy fat every year. Before I park this RV, I drive into the middle of the woods and I spend 2 weeks where I just have nothing but water.
Nice.
So I do a 2 week water fast. I mean, I take like salt, I take magnesium, potassium,
Sure.
and sodium. But then I do that, and it's kind of like a spiritual reset. It started out, it's more spiritual than it is even health wise. But then after hearing how well, like how good it is for your body to do all these repairs with the fasting, and that made it possible was the learning. Because like if I didn't know what I read, I would be like, I'm dying. Like you're dying. This is terrible. You shouldn't do this. But having the information, knowing how good the fast is for your bodies, like metabolically, I guess it's like, okay, I can do this, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, you said a couple of fascinating things there. One, the fact that you can do two-week fast. I think to most people today, that seems
Everyone thinks
unfathomable.
I'm gonna kill myself. And like when I go to
Yeah,
do it, they're like, oh, you're dying. This is so unhealthy. Like you get the comment because I document it and I actually use it as well now. I do a comedy tour called Hungry for Laughs. And we
nice.
raise money October, November. I do this tour and we raise money for local food banks and charities. So I use that 2 week fast as well to promote that every time. So I'm like, hey,
Brilliant.
like I'm raising awareness for the Hunger for Laughs tour. And yeah, people are always like, you're gonna die. Like, what are you doing? But it is, yeah, I think just misinformation that people don't have, right?
It's the opposite. It actually makes you more resilient. It
Right,
makes you better at digesting food so
right.
that whatever food you eat, you absorb more of it. There's so many, call it interesting, like, there's one, the psychological aspect there is genius, right? So
Right.
that's something I think today is worth trillions in terms of marketing that has been pumped into the, especially North American population that you got to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You need to eat for energy. And it's these subtle, small phrases that have hijacked people's belief systems that has taken them further away from them understanding what science is.
Right.
Because if you say, "Hey, this is bad for me," you'll see how you start getting sick. You
Right.
will cause your own problems where you're like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm feeling great. Oh, okay, I have some cravings. Man, this is annoying, but I'll break through it. Oh, okay, day two, I crushed it. Day three, hey, it's gone. Day four, I'm not hungry anymore. Now I'm super lucid. I'm extremely like mentally acute. My cognition has never been sharper. And all of
Yes.
a sudden you break through this other portion. Now, as people experience, longer fasts, they'll do what I would say is they'll step onto nature's operating table
Right.
where day maybe 7, day 8, all of a sudden it's an awful day. And then they'll sleep for a large portion of it. And then they'll get up and they feel awful. They'll drink plenty of fluids and they'll just feel what happened yesterday I was great, today I'm awful. But this is nature's operating table. It's so funny and it's so, I think,
I
true
like
to
that
form
coin, nature's operating table. That's funny. That's great. You got to patent that.
because, yeah,
Yeah.
like sure, I'm sure you can, right? But the funny part is that you're whatever you are, the body is set to come with all of the regenerative principles already intact.
Right.
It's phenomenal. You get a cut, it heals. Why did someone fall into this weird state of belief where if you have other problems, it won't fix itself? Now, I'll caution say it's very, very important, like you said, to have knowledge, to go seek knowledge. And I think this is the part that's hard today is because if you go to a healthcare professional, they'll just tell you, hey, that's not good for you.
Right.
But at the same time, those healthcare professionals, 70% of them get, a basic question that breaks the law of thermodynamics with, hey, how does fat leave the body? They'll say,
Hmm.
oh, 70%. And this was, I forget the doctor's name. He's got an awesome talk on it. He had a publication where the most educated individuals said, oh, well, it gets converted to energy. And that breaks the law of conservation of mass. So no,
Right.
you breathe
You
out
breathe
the
it out,
fat.
right? You breathe out your
Absolutely.
fat.
So you
Yeah.
breathe out the fat. Carbon dioxide is your byproduct, and that's what your fat is. It's a bunch of carbon.
Right.
So, you know, now where do you get the information? And I think this is the beauty of today, especially with podcasts and whatnot. You can hear an idea, but then you can go down the rabbit hole yourself to say, hey, I'm really interested in this. Does this apply to me now in my life? Because this isn't for everyone. This
Right.
isn't for maybe the 18-year-old or 21-year-old. They're okay. They're still building up. But as soon as you hit, I would say anyway, you're in your early 20s. I've been doing this since I was in my early 20s for over a decade and a half. And by the way, I walk around shredded. Not
Yeah.
to like not to more of like a showcase for the rest of humanity. But like, listen, this isn't that hard. Uh,
Right.
the hard part was finding that temptation and the food balance. But I'm
Right.
also in a state where if I eat, I get sick. If I overeat or if I eat the thing, so
Yeah.
my body punishes me, and therefore it's easier to stay in this kind
Well,
of all the time shredded just because, like you said, I found the information very early
mhm.
on. I was hungry for the information. The information comes easy because I'm a biologist. I was born a biologist. I was like
Right.
4 years old to ask my parents, what happens if we zoom in more? What happens if we
Yeah.
magnify this more? And they're like, stop asking questions, man. Go,
Yeah.
you go tell
Go.
me. Yeah, you
Yeah.
tell me how what the answer is. So there's always been this insatiable curiosity for specifically life, and what I've come to the understanding is that most people that are quick to speak, I would say, are very excited about things, but they're not. They showcase to you that they're at a very superficial level of understanding,
Right.
and the depth of it is it's very, very, very much so. Like I said at the beginning, a grain of sand on a beach, where if you recognize it's a grain of sand on the beach, it never gets boring. When you come in, you understand, insulin signaling. I've heard so many people jump in and say, and that's the end all be all. But no, that's a great way for you to be able to tie in with your metabolism. Understanding insulin signaling is like your bridge to jump into
Well,
this more complicated concept of, hey, this is energy metabolism.
well, that's where I just found because I like in that Jason Fung book, he is so like it's not calories, it's all insulin. And I wanted to believe that. I was like, okay, perfect. This'll do this, but it doesn't seem to the calories still seem to matter like a lot because I was like, okay, I'm gonna eat everything that is like no sugar, even just like, eating a lot of fats and proteins and meat and raw meat, but I'd still gain weight. Like if I overate, I would still gain weight. Like it was, like you couldn't just eat 5,000 calories a day of beef and be like, look, I got no sugar in there. There should be no insulin. Like I would still, like the,
Yeah, for sure. So where's some missing parts there, right? Like there's definitely a call it caloric component, but
right.
calories don't mean anything, right? Just if you understand the idea of calories, then
It's a,
then
a heat measurement of heat, isn't it?
brilliant. All right, Alex, yeah, you impressed me, Alex, here because most people that are talking about calories have no idea what it is. But yeah, that's right. So it's a measurement. It's like a
Right.
ruler, and it's a measurement of heat, not even of energy in
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a equivalent in which you're trying to jump to another topic. So if you understand calories, then jump to the other topic, which is simply macronutrients,
Right.
carbs, fat, and
Protein.
protein.
Yeah.
But to really kind of break that down, why do we go from calories to this concept? Why is calories only useful as utility until you can understand the macros? Is that when we eat food, you can think of it, we eat it for three reasons. One of it is for the calorie or for the macronutrient portion of it.
Right.
The other portion for it is the actual substance of our being. So what do I mean by that? You eat omega 3s, you're not burning omega 3s for energy. It's too valuable of a molecule for you to burn up
Hmm.
or for you to oxidize. We don't actually burn our food. We oxidize it. So
Okay.
we we need that in order for our brain. We need that for composition, for the actual substance of what we are. So when you think metabolism, and I hear this often when people say it, they just think about burning, like oxidizing energy, burning in energy. That's what they think metabolism is. Metabolism is all of the reactions that make up life, every single one.
Right.
So the ones that are the most important are not the energy ones. Yes, that's the obvious thing. You're just going to keep burning, substances for you to get the energy. But what is the foundations of your walls, of your cell membranes, of your house? Like, what is it built out of? Is it built out of something very fragile that can get sick very often, that can break down, that it has holes like trans fat? You ingest how much trans fat, that's what's going to be the composition of your membrane.
Okay.
So now when you're thinking on the longer part and longer term, hey, I'm doing all these things, but I'm still having problems. I ate these things, I'm still having problems. That's fine, but you got to do the work to incorporate the stuff into the membrane. And this is why if it took you a long time to get to your problem, you're not going to fix it in 2 days. You're going to fix it with the principles of life. What is it? You must fast so that your body has the ability to pull and break down things so that you can refortify it with the proper things. Refortify is an awful word because refortified foods are catastrophic, but this is the idea of, hey,
Right.
I'm eating food not for energy. I'm eating food to rebuild my structure. And this is why food
Right.
that's alive, you said whole food, but I call it alive. You
Okay.
need to eat food that's alive. So some things they don't do well in certain agricultural practices. Like a cucumber, there's just too much pesticide that gets pulled into it. It's doing you more damage than
Well,
good.
that's what I've heard a lot about. Like I eat a lot of spinach, and I
Yeah.
heard it's like not good.
Yeah, a lot of spinach has some caveats. One, you got to get rid of the waxy, substance around the outside, and
Mm.
two, it's full of oxalates. And so that's like a buzzword,
Does it
but
matter when
there's
it's organic?
nah, that's good. Yeah, that's
How
definitely
do
a
you
step to good.
tell?
Spinach. So spinach is something in terms of it's phenomenal for you, but in only certain quantities, right? So having
Right.
it every single day might not be ideal, but having it, 2 days within a week, pretty great. But a big issue is when somebody goes to this, call it healthy diet, and they eat everything that has high amounts of, call it these acids or substances in it that give us problems. So like oxalates is the one that's pretty, I think, common talked about. Where like, hey, almonds are very healthy, spinach is very healthy, kale is very healthy. They're also very high
Right.
in oxalates, and that's going to cause issues with iron absorption, for example. And then people will be like, well, I need an iron supplement. There's this is why I think it's great to find individuals that you can ask questions to that have your best interest at heart, right? This is what I've been doing. I
Right.
am the guy who bridges all the science mumbo jumbo to every individual because at the end of the day, you don't want to be part of the call it population demographic saying like, well, does this fit? Am I one of the, 51% that made this chart possible? No,
Right.
you're going to be an outlier in some regard. You want someone to be able to talk to you about your biology. And I'm
Right.
excited to talk to you about biology because the more people I learn that exist, the more I know of really what's going on. What are the actual connections? What are
So
the pathways that govern our life?
what's the first step someone takes when they want to, I guess if they come to see you, right? So if they come to see you and is it you need to do like a blood panel or how do you start?
No, for sure. I'm just a guy in a chair in which you can talk to, right? And I
Right.
offer people as call it much of a customized, personalized approach to what they need, whether they want analytics on their biology, that's obviously a
Right, but
service.
so I guess for like
But if they
I'm
want,
very interested in so I just bought one of these. It's like
yeah,
I don't know if these are any good, but it's if you see these like these human body pods.
nice, yeah.
So I bought one of these and it gives you your metabolic age
So
on
yeah,
there.
sure. I would
But
say
it's like a
take that all
how
with
do
a grain
they
of salt.
I know how do they determine that? Like what are those things using for
Right.
metabolic age? And like what
Uh,
is the accuracy on these things?
Not great, not great. Remember, you're
Right.
using like a general population to be able to build an algorithm in which then it'll service maybe 60 to 70% of the population.
Right.
Anything outside of that, it's like, okay, well, we won't be able to account for it. And you
Right.
don't have the ability to punch in your specific, call it scenario in which then you can shift or train the algorithm. So in other ways, this is what I do for people where remember biological age is not real. There's no call it like taking time clock
Yeah.
in the body. We're using that as a concept to be able to say, hey, is this measurement better or worse for you? And I genuinely find it a phenomenal way to communicate very complicated biology without going into call it, oh, it's a risk factor. You got 40% increased chance for risk. That doesn't mean anything to most people. Doesn't mean
Right.
anything even to me as a biologist. I still don't know if there's really a problem or not because, like for example, I share this. I have a 91-year-old who has Alzheimer's, whose
Right.
blood looks like 180, and he's still alive. His lung
Wow.
function's great. So do I just say, hey, your lung function's the age of a 70-year-old, so you're good? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
People with way better metrics have died a lot sooner than he has from, things that you wouldn't have imagined. So,
And is the
we
biggest factor they kind of doesn't touch on in the book that it's your epigenetic walls seem to be the biggest determination on your life
Yeah, for
span.
sure. I mean, I remember people are their businesses first and their scientists second in that regard when they're trying to present their call it stuff to a larger audience. That isn't true, right? And why I say that isn't true is because, you have to look back and then infer, oh, this person died. What was the, metrics in their epigenetics? Oh, it was this. Uh, but there's something very odd where, again, how do you address the guy who's got an epigenetic age of 200? But he's still alive. Why
Right.
isn't he dying? So there's obviously more layers to it, in which I would say are the bigger players. And
But like
so
what
what's the
is it?
bigger player?
Well, no,
Here's
what is it? The
yeah,
difference between like whales live to be like 100 or 200. something like that,
Mhm.
right? Like your tortoises, stuff like that. What is it about their genetics that's different than ours that allows them to live longer, as opposed to like an ant that dies, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So the good one that's been studied quite a bit is I believe the naked mole rat versus your average rodent.
Okay.
So I think the naked mole rat lives to about 20 and your average rodent lives to about, 2, right? two
Right.
years. That's a massive difference, even though they're quite related on the classifications, the way we do it for animals. It's called taxonomy. So a big part that it's been identified is the way in which you can repair DNA. So the creatures that live longer repair DNA and have more DNA repair, call it enzymes active, and so they can maintain the integrity of DNA. And but
Right.
that's one part. So maintaining integrity of DNA means, like I was saying before, that allows renewal for the machinery of the cell, the proteins of the cell.
So is that again like the NAD level being higher? Is
So
that
this is
a
this is the hard
component of
part. Yeah.
it?
So NAD, if this is a very specific molecule, and this is going to be a metabolite that's being used as a resource by a cell. So
Right.
when you try and supplement that, remember there's you call it the guardrails or the
Y
walls or however you want to kind of frame
yeah.
it. You adding more in there might not do anything, but you reshaping the protein around that, you reshaping how you use your pool of NAD can shift it. So this is why
Right.
a lot of the supplements that are sold are very good marketing, and they'll only tell you
That
a very narrow range of
Well, I've heard that
experiments.
that's what I've heard. It's like you can't just take NAD because it won't get through that barrier. So you actually have to take like a
Even if it did,
precursor
even if
that
it
then
did, NAD
helps.
is a molecule that's extremely quickly regenerated and used. It's constantly
Right.
in use. So would you like to just throw some more in there and it's going to get evaporated very quickly? Or do you want to shift the way that your proteins are regenerating it? So obviously you're going to target call it for what I do for hacking and getting you on the right track.
Hmm.
You'd like to do things that help the protein machinery. What helps that protein machinery do the things it needs to do? This is, for example, the prerequisite that everyone I put on is you must, as quickly as possible, shift your lifestyle to eat, for example, twice a day, right? The intermittent fasting. Why
Right.
is this key? Because this is a way in which gives the ability for your, the processes that regenerate NAD to have the best chance to go towards a positive direction. And if you're constantly eating, it's going to be very hard to heal. So, hey, let's get you on this. What's the big principle that we're going to now tie in to help understand why we're doing this? Well, we're doing this for very, very specific metabolic flexibility. I want you every single day to produce ketones. It's not about being
Right.
in a keto diet. It's not about not eating carbohydrates. It's not about eating carbohydrates. It's not about eating protein. It's none of that. It's I want your liver, you can't ingest it. It's not about ingesting ketones. I want your liver to turn on the enzymes to say, hey, we are going to produce beta hydroxybutyrate. When you turn on those enzymes, it's not just that beta hydroxybutyrate gets produced, it's that a whole side of your liver, a whole factory portion gets lit up and a bunch of machines, a bunch of enzymes work simultaneously. And you can use just the metric of ketones being produced as saying, okay, that side's activated.
Right.
So knowing this, knowing when you do, let me jump in here for some, maybe that's now maybe a little complicated, but let me try and walk you through it. This is like the golden sauce here that I bring into a lot of the lectures and
Okay.
talks that I give, right? This is sort of like, and there's a visual usually I give, but
Yeah. Yeah.
when when you do a 24-hour fast,
Hmm.
okay, what happens is that your liver starts releasing glycogen, right? And so glycogen is stored sugar for the human version, starch is the vegetable version. So in 24 hours, your liver starts releasing glycogen. It starts releasing the sugars. And why do we need sugar? We actually only need it so that we don't fall into a coma. Our red blood cells need sugar. Nothing else needs sugar. So
Okay.
your body must produce sugar for your red blood cells, right? It's the one and only cell. The slight caveat with your eye too, but it's the one and only cell.
Yeah.
Always a caveat, right? But
Yeah.
it's the cell that you need because it can't use anything else. It has to use sugar. Brain, it doesn't matter. It can use ketones. It's good.
Right.
So now that you're 24 hours in, no glycogen in there, you can look at the liver. It's pale in terms of staining for glycogen. But once you get to the 72-hour mark, so 3 days in fasting, all of a sudden glycogen starts reappearing, right? So you went from
No
glycogen,
glycogen. Yeah.
no glycogen to glycogen reappearing, but you're not eating
But
anything.
you didn't eat any. Yeah, yeah.
So what does that mean? That means you went from, hey, turn on the enzymes to break down glycogen to, hey, we have no glycogen to, hey, turn on some other enzyme in order to produce the glycogen. Where did you produce the glycogen from? You produced it from fat. So when we talk about these set points, like, hey, I did these things, but then I gained weight right back. This is what you're working with. You're working with machinery that's already set in terms of how big is your reservoir for X, Y, or Z. How big is your reservoir for a fat cell? How big is your reservoir for NAD? How big is your reservoir for glucose? How big is your reservoir for glycogen? There's so much space you've allocated, physical space, for every single one of these, call it equilibria, these metabolic equilibria. And
Right.
having this flexibility to pull from it is a must. Motion. Motion is, let me say the opposite way. When you have a cessation of motion, when there's no more motion, that's
Yeah.
death.
Right.
In every single call it layer that you want to go down. You want to talk about it at the gross anatomical layer to the molecular level. If there is no more motion, you're dead. That's
Right.
it.
I really
This
like that analogy you had of like the liver. It's like a whole other factory size system firing up. So it's like I used to work at a pulp mill, and it's like when you shut stuff down, it was like a big deal because you're like, dude, we better can't leave that system off too long because otherwise, things are gonna rust, parts are gonna seize. Then you go to fire it back up, and you got all kinds of problems. You're like, it's better to just keep it running and keep it going because if we take it down too long, yeah, it's a nightmare.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the same thing that happens within our organs, right? The worst part that happened to, and I think the part that's quite, a little bit tragic is when it happens to the brain, because a lot of us, we think we are somewhere 2 inches between the eyeballs, and that's where we exist. The
Right,
reality is we're all of it. Heck,
right,
you're even call it the outside world is still you because you breathe it in and
right,
it gets transformed into you. You eat you eat food, you eat that spinach, you turn that spinach into Alex. I eat that spinach, I turn it into Daniel. So
right,
the outside world and the inside world, people, I think, from science, it really tells us how this law of conservation of mass is really that we're sharing a set of atoms. We're not separated by any means. So yes, there's a layer of skin that makes me me, so that there's a central, call it perspective. There's a central self.
right.
But it's a very important notion to understand this turnover that's happening and how we facilitate that turnover and the idea of your brain rotting so that you can't speak, you can't longer be present is a shame because it is, call it our prism for consciousness, right? In order for you to be present here and us to have this, we have to have all these faculties working like in absolute miraculous unison. And
Right.
so when we start losing our mental faculties, it's like we're losing, call it, the individual, which is a shame, right? Because
Yeah.
then we no longer get the gift of that individual. And this is where, it's a very, you can't blame, let's just say, blame is a waste of time, but say, oh, it's your fault you have cancer. Oh, it's your fault you're obese. Oh, it's your fault you got arthritis. So there's no point in spending time in that because that doesn't get you to the solution,
Right.
right? Dwelling in the problem doesn't get you to the fact that, ah, overeating has been, a massive part. Ah, the food and call it qualities
And
hasn't
what
been
would you
clean.
say is the biggest thing that you see that causes the health decline? Like, is it people's diet? Is it their sleep patterns? Is it, lack of exercise? What do you think? I mean, it's a different from everyone,
For
but
sure. So I have my this is my belief, right?
yeah,
Like as a scientist, I'll give you knowledge and I will very much so distinguish belief. And it is my belief from what I've been
right,
doing now for over a decade and a half that the biggest part that is the hurdle for people's health, no matter who it is, no matter what issue it is beliefs.
right.
Beliefs are what drive a person towards bad states. If
Do you
they
know
could
what
leave
I
themselves
find?
alone,
Yeah, yeah.
they would find the solution.
Well, that's a funny you say the thing about the beliefs because that's something that I found. It was, I bet my dad would do it, but a lot of people would do it. They would be living an unhealthy lifestyle. And what they would do is they would look at someone who lived a very healthy lifestyle who died early. You know, they'd be like, "Oh, look at that guy. You know, he ran marathons. He was in great shape. Dropped dead 42." He's like, "So you never know, whatever." And then they'll just shovel a cheeseburger in their face, you know? And I'm like, like I don't think that's the right perspective to look at it. That like, yeah, just because that like that guy's an outlier. That really fit, healthy person had an anomaly and dropped dead early. Like, you know, I still think it's your best case scenario to try and be as healthy as possible moving forward.
Absolutely. And the thing I would say to that is like, what made you think that 42-year-old who was running marathons was healthy?
Right. Yeah, I
Clearly,
guess it's
he was addicted to the wrong things. No.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a call it. I hear this often. Oh, I have a very balanced diet, but I have this problem. And so I always wondered, why are people qualifying their call it very healthy states?
Yeah.
I hear people often, tell me like, oh, well, I have a very healthy, call it, diet. And I look at their fridge, I'm like, it's full of vegetable oils.
Right.
Take a look at their products. I'm like, this has got sunflower oil, this has got canola. I'm like, why do you think you're eating healthy? And it's because like,
Right.
what happened is the marketing sold them on, hey, you're on a healthy track, right? And no one ever came and told them, hey, phosphatidylcholine is phenomenal. Like you should make sure you have a lot of phosphatidylcholine in your diet. Do you have any phosphatidylcholine? No? Oh, that's really good for your brain. Where can
Yeah,
you get
what
some? Well, you
what
can eat fish. Eat some fish. Fish will have it. Make sure the fish is call it as, clean as possible. But
dude,
you
I'm
know,
eating this dirty fish today. I got a whole bunch of tuna.
there you go.
But
All right.
I don't think it's like
The
I heard
quality.
tuna's not good for you. But I
Well,
eat a ton of it.
for sure depends on the sourcing, but yeah, your best bet for fish are the tiny fish, sardines, anchovies, herring, right? You can also get
No, those are the worst tasting ones.
no way, man. You just have to know to prep them, right? This is
Yeah,
why having a good cook in your life. I'm convinced. Back in the day, in the medieval days, the last person always to go would be the baker. You know what I
right.
mean? Like just imagine there's like 30, 40, 50 of us. We got a little camp every single morning. There you are, you're baking bread for all of us. We're like, fuck, yeah, okay, dope, man. I'm super hungry. Here we go. Awesome, another fresh loaf. And then someone comes to invade us. Who do you think we're keeping alive?
Yeah, yeah,
If you're the
it's just
only guy in the entire, group that knows how to cook, everyone's protecting the cook.
yeah, yeah, no doubt, eh? That's a good move. I like it. My
So
brother's a chef, actually. Yeah,
nice, nice, yeah. And
yeah,
so knowing how to prepare food is actually a massive part. In today's day and age, we've lost a lot of, call it, the knowledge that's been passed down from our ancestors. Where now, when
yeah.
you go back to try and understand, like, well, why they prepare beans that way? What did they do with their lentils? Why do they have this way of storing meat? Turns
Hmm.
out it's actually metabolically phenomenal when you prepare, beans and you soak them and you do certain spicing to them. You get rid of all the acids and the things in which you don't digest well, and you get the best of it. And so, today when we try and do all these fusions and this kind of, oh, I'm trying to make something very delicious, we can often make a metabolic bomb go off, in our stomachs, or we don't necessarily like the way it interacts with our enzymes, the way we have to digest it, or the way we have to process it. One simple one is people drink cold water while they eat. You should never drink cold water while you eat, right? I mean, what happens to butter when you throw cold water on it? It stiffens up.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you want that to stiffen up in your stomach. You want all the fat to solidify, so you have the next impossible time to emulsify it. No, you want hot liquids, right? And when you look at the Eastern cultures, even when we look at European cultures, you always have hot beverages in small amounts when you're eating, right? You don't want to dilute your
Right.
hyaluronic acid. So there's lots of these kind of small stuff, and it does go back again, like to people's social circles, which influence their beliefs. If you have a
Well,
strong
that's
social
what
circle,
my
yeah.
my family, like growing up, like I played a lot of hockey, and all the time my mom would take us to McDonald's. She'd be like, "Oh, you gotta go. You need energy for your game today. You know, you just play." And she'd be like, "Oh, you gotta restore your energy." And I think a lot of it was just the being ignorant to the fact of how bad it was for you. You know, like just in early 90s, the fast food came out, like it's a cheeseburger, you got meat, you got a bun, you got bread, you know. She's like, "Oh, it's great." And I think a lot of it is like you're saying with the belief thing. It's not actually that these people it's not like my mom was like trying to feed us a terrible diet. It's just she probably was very unaware of how bad that food actually is for you.
Oh,
She knows,
most,
like, she
yeah,
knows now.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Most people were completely unaware. Heck, today, still we have a majority of people unaware. But yeah, the fact that your bun has more ingredients than everything that that you have combined in the entire restaurant is, kind of telltale sign like what's going on with these buns. Like
Yeah.
they're engineered for for space travel, let alone for like your
I've
daily
heard that's a
consumption.
really good one is like look at the ingredient list and like what's the ingredient list on an orange? It's like orange. Like, it's like one thing. Yeah. And
Yeah,
just
for sure.
try.
And that's a must today, right? That's another thing. You have to start reading labels. There's a bit of a cop out laziness where people say, "Oh, well, if it's on the grocery store shelf, then it must be tested and regulated and all this other stuff." And that's a bit of a that's a la la land. The people living in fantasy where they think someone else is going to protect them and make sure that everything on the grocery store shelf is, call it, palatable for their health and well-being. Where, from science side, we've shown that trans fats you can't digest. You don't have the enzyme to break down a trans fat, yet margarine's still sold.
Right.
Like we've shown that it's a carcinogen and it's still sold. So,
Yeah.
if how many more examples do you need before you sort of wake up to the fact like, oh, okay, life lags. Not only that, but you have to people to have to take up the mantle to actually fight.
Well,
They have to have
that's
the energy to do this.
well, that's what I always use like asbestos as an excuse, like an example of that, right? Like when asbestos came out, they're like this thing's great. The insulation value is unreal. It's fireproof. Like we need this everywhere. This is like the best thing going. And then it turns out they're like, okay, this is the worst thing you can have in your house.
Yeah.
And it was, but at the time, people thought it was great, So it just showed, like you're saying, like the not just the science legs, but I guess life legs. So it's like we don't know what we don't know.
Absolutely. And it's also, how'd you say it, like negligence, right? There is a proper way to do things. It's not that difficult to test things if they have a toxicity or if it's not bad. There is a call it like willingness to cut costs and to the sacrifice on things because of pressures, economic pressures,
Right,
social pressures, and so not everyone has to call it the same foresight or understanding. Like there's I forget the Nobel Prize winner, but there's the idea of there's eight intelligences, if not more,
right.
and verbal logic is the two big ones for school, but then you have interpersonal, intrapersonal, musical, proprioceptive, musical, and one of them he considered, and there's very good, call it neurology to back it up, is naturalist. So your understanding of things that are alive, materials. If you see something like, that'll be a good fiber for clothing. Some of us
Right,
are born into this world with a very low naturalist understanding. And so if you have a very low naturalist understanding, health is going to be something that escapes you constantly. Whereas
right.
if you're born with a very high naturalist understanding, health will be on the forefront of your mind for everything you make in terms of decision. So
Yeah,
this is again where I come back to, beliefs and your social structure. If you have a social structure where you have a guy like me in your family or a guy like me in your social circle, it's pretty hard to fall into tropes like the McDonald's, into the things in which, science lags behind, you as a human being don't. You're experiencing it present. And the
right.
more you are aware, understanding, the more knowledge you have, the more experience, the quicker you are at picking up, hey, what's going to be good for you, what's bad for you. So, hey, is this something have you can take a substance and it has a 1% chance to damage your heart, but it might help you with something else. And everyone's trying to sell you on it. They're like, oh, you got to get it. This is great. Everyone's doing it. And then you have me in your social circle. I'm like, well, yeah, 99% chance you won't get hurt, but 1% chance it'll scar your heart, which doesn't regenerate. There's no
Right, dude,
regeneration
I've
for your
heard of that.
heart.
I heard your heart doesn't, eh? Like,
So it's like this isn't, your skeletal muscle. This isn't like your intestines or, something else that just like your bone. Your bone's phenomenal. No, buddy, this is your heart. And 1 in 100 people is gonna have a heart scarring for the rest of their life. No chance, man. I'm not letting you take this thing. I don't care how fucking dope everyone else is trying to sell it. What's the
right.
other way we can do to get this dope effect? Oh, what? Just have a boatload of vitamin C, selenium, and iodine. Okay, then get on that. Like, fuck, why would you
Yeah,
risk it?
yeah.
But if you don't have a voice of reason and you get caught up in the wave, then your life will take a massive turn in direction. And though fasting can help for a lot of things, it's not like, how'd you say it? It's
Yeah,
not,
the be all end all.
ex
It'll fix everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right. There's still a level of biology is cruel in the sense where when one organism messes up, well, no problem, we'll just birth another organism.
Right.
So, and through trial and error, creatures learn. They pick up things in which they're supposed to be averse to and whatnot. So,
It does help. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm a cautious man, right? I'm a very cautious individual. I'm an adrenaline junkie at the same time. So because I'm a cautious individual and health is at the forefront of my psyche, I do this for a living because I'm going to do it anyways. Right?
Right.
As an 18-year-old, while my friends were getting smashed, and drunk, I was concerned about them. Like, what a
Right.
weird scenario to be in, right? Where I'm like, I'm not having fun like everyone else is. I'm worried that guy's going to hit his head. Like that guy 3 times was like close to, like I don't know,
Yeah, tripping over a curve or
tripping
something
over
where
and
yeah.
smashing his skull. So I'd stay closer to him, and then I was kind of observing myself. I'm like, I don't think this is normal, right? I don't. And then you recognize, okay, well, everyone has something else to bring to the table, right? And
Well, that the
everybody,
health thing is really valuable, man. Like that, like you're saying, having you in the friend circle, that's what got me healthy was I had an ex from she was an Australian lady and she was so health conscious. Like she wouldn't let the sun touch her. Like she would like have like we had to like rope off the window and she's like, no, I don't want the radiation on my skin. And like it was
she got that backwards though. Sunlight is imperative for your health.
yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I'm like, this is gonna
100%,
be good for you. But
100%,
then people that say
100%.
the sun is bad for you, I don't know.
No, that's an absolute. This is another good idea. Where how did someone sell you the idea like sunlight's bad? Right? They
Right,
they they sold the idea like sunlight's bad, where the majority, 99.9% of people are outside in the sun every single day,
right,
and nothing bad's happening. And the opposite, you have an incredible amount of biology tied in to your exposure to sunlight. So much so that when sunlight hits your eyeball in the
yeah,
morning specifically, it gets melatonin to be produced right behind the eye. So melatonin is considered like the sleepy, the darkness hormone.
right,
Actually, it's also produced soon in the morning when you see light. What happens if you don't see light in the morning and you just go straight to heavy blue light right away in your screens? You actually don't produce that melatonin in the right dose to help regenerate your eye. And so you get the
right.
call it eye diseases later in life. So,
Okay, dude, my dad's got a detached retina. It keeps having a fix.
ouch. Yeah, that's going back into to the surgery room. But also the way in which light hits your eye is going to stimulate your pituitary and your hypothalamus, which is going
Hmm.
to change the way that you process food to say, hey, do I store it more for fat or do I use it? So light affects your hormones to such an extent that it determines your metabolism. So light, an absolutely like game changer for your health. And if someone's trying to tell you, oh, the obvious thing is bad, it's because they're trying to profit from it. Let's be serious.
Right,
That's the only actual answer. They're trying to profit off it. They're trying to profit and trying to sell you different things. And don't be deceived because just there's 3 different entities telling you stuff. It's one entity owning the 3 different entities, trying to tell you, hey, I'm a philanthropist. I'm trying to tell you it's bad. Make sure you slather up all this chemical sunscreen on your skin
right,
and make sure you don't get hit by any of the radiation. Radiation is very damaging. It's like, yeah, but the radiation is not what we're talking about. That radiation actually interacts with your pigments that are present in your skin that actually then cascade into serotonin production, into GABA production. This stuff is tied in with your neurochemistry, let alone the vitamin production, let alone the immune function, let alone circulation. It goes a lot farther than vitamin D. I'll put it that way.
right. Yeah, yeah. Dude, well, this has been great, man. I wish I could keep you longer. I know we got to get you out of here. One thing I want to ask real quick, I like asking everyone, what is something that you used to believe to be true that you no longer do?
I mean, the sunlight thing was a good example. The eating in call it like you have to eat a lot to make sure you have energy. That's another good one that we talked about. All of these were beliefs I had because I learned,
Right,
from one professional that this was the way to go. And I guess another one that probably a big one is that, I used to believe that your dreams and your visualization were just, like imaginary. That's not reality.
right,
I've shifted to say, well, no, actually, your imagination always comes true.
Right.
You just don't call your imagination when it starts coming and hits you face forward. But your imagination is almost like this leading persona in which you like to be. And if
Right.
you keep imagining yourself a doctor, if you keep imagining yourself a scientist, if you keep imagining yourself a comedian, one day you'll wake up and you are that, not
Yeah.
recognizing that you caught up to the imagination. So
Right.
that would be a pretty big one in terms of what our brain is doing in order to guide us into the person we're becoming, or that
Oh,
we are today.
dude, I really like that. That's a really, really cool one, man. I love it. Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, well, Daniel, where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you or want to follow your work or your research?
Right on. Yeah. So Timeline Sciences is the name of my consultancy. Very simple. We have one timeline. We use science to describe that timeline, and I provide custom personalized solutions. I have the high-end Immortal program. If someone's looking to have the vast majority of all their biology, their blood tests, their metrics, their routines that they should be doing at the part in their life. This is my high-end program, and I have a boatload of other personalized programs. Everything is on the website that you can shoot a message to me and then get in touch with what you need. The more I open myself up, the more I have the pleasure of serving, and it's been quite the journey so far. So happy to be that nexus point for people.
No, that's amazing, man. Well, thank you so much for your time, Daniel. Everyone go check him out. And yeah, I really appreciate it. We got to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, Alex. It was a blast.
Okay, take care.